What led to the Israel-Hamas War of 2023? The seeds of this conflict were sown much earlier, and the events leading up to the war were a complex mix of politics, religion, and territorial ambitions. In the heart of the conflict is the victory of Hamas in the 2006 Palestinian legislative election, which marked a significant shift in the political landscape of the region. Hamas, a Sunni Islamist political and military organization, seized control of the Gaza Strip, a narrow piece of land bordering Egypt and Israel. The organization's governance of Gaza was marked by its long-term vision of destroying Israel, a vision propagated by the leader of Hamas in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar. On the Israeli side, Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister at the time, faced criticism for his policy of empowering Hamas in Gaza. His governance was marked by a robust response to Hamas's rise to power, and his policies fueled the existing tensions between Israel and Hamas. And then, there were the increased settler attacks. Israeli settlers, backed by the Israeli government, were expanding their settlements in disputed territories, and this sparked tensions with the Palestinians who saw these lands as their own. These tensions were further escalated by clashes around the Al-Aqsa Mosque, a holy site revered by both Jews and Muslims. These conflicts were not just about land or political control, they were deeply rooted in history, religion, and identity. They were about two groups of people who both saw the same piece of land as their rightful home. But amidst these tensions, there were efforts to mediate and de-escalate the situation. Diplomats and peacekeepers tried to broker talks and ceasefires, hoping to prevent a full-blown conflict. But these efforts were in vain, and the tensions eventually boiled over into the Israel-Hamas War of 2023. Mediation efforts were made to de-escalate tensions, but the conflict still erupted. On October 7, 2023, an armed conflict broke out between Israel and Hamas-led Palestinian militants from the Gaza Strip. In the initial stages of the conflict, the world watched in disbelief as the familiar yet horrifying scenes of war unfolded. The tension that had been brewing for so long finally erupted into open conflict. The catalyst? A barrage of rockets launched against Israeli cities, a direct challenge and provocation that Israel could not ignore. The militants, guided by Hamas, breached the Gaza-Israel barrier, and the rockets rained down on Israel's cities, leaving a trail of destruction and fear in their wake. The intent was clear: to create chaos and to disrupt the lives of the Israeli people. The response from Israel was swift and decisive. In retaliation, Israel launched an extensive aerial bombardment campaign against the Gaza Strip. The sky was ablaze with the fiery trails of missiles as they raced towards their targets. The Israeli Defense Forces, known for their precision and tactical prowess, aimed to neutralize the threat posed by the militants. But the conflict didn't remain in the skies. As the air assaults continued, Israel initiated a ground invasion of Gaza. Israeli troops marched into the heart of the conflict, their boots echoing on the war-torn streets of Gaza. Their mission was to root out the militants and to dismantle the infrastructure that allowed such attacks to be launched against Israel. However, war is never as simple as two opposing forces clashing on a battlefield. In this modern age, warfare extends beyond the physical realm. It permeates the digital world, influencing opinions and shaping narratives. Artificial intelligence, or AI, played a significant role in this conflict, although not always accurately or reliably, as reported by various tech companies. The war was not confined to a single day or a single battle. It was a series of relentless attacks and counterattacks, a cycle of violence that seemed to have no end. The streets of Gaza and the cities of Israel became the stage for a brutal war, a war that would leave deep scars on both sides. The war was on, and it was brutal. The toll of the conflict was heavy on both sides. Let's delve into the human cost of the Israel-Hamas War of 2023. This war, like any other, was not just a clash of political ideologies or a battle for territorial control. It was, above all, a human tragedy, with ordinary people paying the highest price. In the echoing booms of explosions and the deafening roar of gunfire, the human cost was profoundly felt. On the Israeli side, over 1,400 lives were lost, and more than 3,400 people were injured. These numbers are not just statistics. They represent fathers, mothers, daughters, sons, friends, and neighbors. Each one had a life, a story, a future that was brutally cut short. But the devastation didn't stop at the borders of Israel. The Palestinian territories, particularly the Gaza Strip, bore the brunt of the conflict. The count of lives lost exceeded 2,778, and the injured soared to almost 10,000. The majority of these casualties were civilians, many of them women and children. Beyond the immediate death and injury toll, the war wreaked havoc on Gaza's already fragile health system. With hospitals and clinics damaged or destroyed, medical personnel overwhelmed, and supplies running dangerously low, many who might have survived their injuries succumbed to them. The war created a health crisis within a crisis, with the most vulnerable bearing the brunt of it. But the war's effects were not limited to the physical. The acute shortages of water, food, and fuel amplified the suffering of the Palestinian people, turning daily living into a struggle for survival. Imagine the despair of a mother unable to feed her hungry child, or the helplessness of a father unable to protect his family from the cold of winter because there's no fuel for heating. In the face of such overwhelming human cost, voices from around the world rose in protest, demanding an end to the violence. The war has led to widespread protests and calls for a ceasefire. The cry for peace grew louder with each passing day, a testament to the shared human desire for an end to suffering and a longing for peace. The international community had its say on the conflict. As the conflict between Israel and Hamas escalated, the world responded with a mix of concern, outrage, and calls for peace. Accusations of war crimes were not uncommon, with both sides facing scrutiny for their actions. The severity of the conflict and the toll it took on civilian lives prompted international incidents, further complicating an already tangled web of geopolitics. In the midst of this, a key figure stepped onto the world stage. President Joe Biden made a significant journey to both Israel and Jordan, marking his second visit to a war zone in the year 2023. This visit was not merely symbolic. It was a clear statement of America's support for Israel amid its escalating war against Hamas. His itinerary was extensive, involving discussions with Israeli officials about hostages believed to be held by Hamas in Gaza. He also met with a range of influential figures, including Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, Jordan's King Abdullah, and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. The humanitarian needs of Gaza's civilians were a central topic of these dialogues. In his interactions, President Biden emphasized Israel's right to defend itself against Hamas terrorists, a stance that was both lauded and criticized on the international stage. Yet, even as he affirmed this right, the president's visit signaled a broader recognition of the complex and multifaceted nature of the conflict. As the world watched, other nations also voiced their concerns, their condemnations, and their hopes for peace. Protests sprung up in cities across the globe, and calls for a ceasefire rang out from international organizations and individual citizens alike. Yet, for all the words spoken and actions taken, the conflict continued to rage on, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. The international community, while divided in their views, were united in their hope for a peaceful resolution. The world watched as the conflict unfolded, with many hoping for a peaceful resolution. The war left deep scars on both sides. The dust may have settled on the battlefield, but the aftermath of the Israel-Hamas war of 2023 continues to ripple through the region and the world. The conflict has left the Gaza Strip in a state of acute crisis. Critical shortages of water, food, and fuel have become the norm for the people of Gaza. Their health system, already strained before the war, is now on the brink of collapse. The blockade imposed by Israel, criticized as collective punishment, has only compounded these hardships. The blockade has drawn widespread criticism. Critics argue that it exacerbates the humanitarian crisis and goes against the principles of international law. It has become a focal point of international attention, with calls for its lifting growing louder each day. Yet the repercussions of the war extend beyond the immediate humanitarian crisis. The conflict has deepened the mistrust and animosity between the two sides, making the path to a lasting peace even more challenging. The war has also led to accusations of war crimes and international incidents, further complicating the situation. The war has also had a profound impact on the political landscape. Israel's prime minister at the time, Benjamin Netanyahu, has faced criticism for his policy of empowering Hamas in Gaza. On the other side, the leader of Hamas in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, remains steadfast in his long-term vision of destroying Israel. The war has left a lasting imprint on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It has underscored the volatility of the situation and the urgent need for a resolution. Yet it has also highlighted the complexities and challenges that lie in the path to peace. As we reflect on the aftermath of the Israel-Hamas war of 2023, we are reminded of the human cost of conflict. The war has claimed thousands of lives, disrupted countless others, and left deep scars on both sides. The war is over, but the path to peace remains fraught with challenges.